Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
I'm very excited today. We're speaking to 7 Medical Battalion Group and fantastic people. And this specific one is Dr. Andre Roux, who was there. And I know he was also a Free-to Battalion and other places. But before we start, can we just see what the sponsors have to say? I've been asked by many people how they can assist the channel. Now, there are various ways. For now, I want to speak about the Patrons. You can join the Patreons where you support us by donating $5 a month. If you want to do more than $5, of course, you're welcome. But $5 is the minimum. And it's completely free in the sense that if you don't want to carry on with it, you just cancel your subscription and then the $5 will not be deducted from you anymore. Now, what you get out of it from the Patreons is you see many of the videos you see first. And you have direct access to me. So if you want to talk to me or you have ideas or you want to just meet somebody who I have access to, normally through the patrons, we will definitely bend backwards to assist. So it's a good cause because we need the money to pay for the internet, for equipment, for fuel. When I was in South Africa recently, we drove almost 10,000 kilometers to record all the different museums and aircraft and people and armored vehicles and things like that. And the Patreons are the one who is paying for the fuel by making their donations. Now, there's 100,000 people a month who come to Legacy. They watch on average 30,000 hours, between 25 and 34,000 hours a month for videos. And out of that 100,000, only 50 people, as I speak here now, which is January 2025, is willing to give us $5. So if you have $5, please go to the link. You can find it everywhere underneath videos. You can also find it under this video. Go to Patreon, sign up, and let me see you in the Patreons. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to the video. Doctor, thank you for coming, and we really appreciate you being here. Can I ask you, how did you end up in the army? And I also understand you from Wits University, which in my days was a very suspicious thing to be when you go to the army. So, but it's over to you. I'm listening.
Thank you, Koos. We had we qualified in 84, did my internship in 1985, and in 1986, about 10% of my class was still left in the country. And a couple of us had been to the then J.G. Stratham Hospital together, and we had all made the decision to stay and assumed that would mean going to the military. So we used to run together and go to gym a bit together, sort of just think we take the worst edge off the exercise of the military. And so it was actually, we all were called up and went to, it was the gasworks in those days, sort of that 8 o'clock in the morning at the gasworks in Joburg from where we left. So there was a whole group of us Witsies together that ended up at the gasworks and all hopped on the train together. Remember the trains in those days, they closed the windows so that everybody would know it was a military train and was filled with potential military recruits, and nobody could mistake it for just a bunch of civvies going somewhere. Toddling off past Soweto, we sort of sat in the train and got a bit more quiet as the day went on. Train goes past this place and we look out the window and it looks like this old reform school. And we look out and we think, what a dump. And about 20 minutes later, the train stops and they load us up on a whole bunch of Bedfords and stuff still. And the next thing we find ourselves back at this red brick building that we ended up saying, what a dump, and we thank God we're not going there. Of course, they didn't know how many people were arriving, so we overfilled the base. And I was fortunate that the Witsies managed to grab one part of one of the bungalows. So we had our own little Wits bungalow. The downside of it, of course, was that it started raining the next day. And the tent guys had to use our bathroom. So we were cleaning bathrooms filled with mud every single day. But we were a pleasant group, and it was a fun group there. And we had one of our classmates was an extremely talented musician, and he brought his bassoon with. So we had our evening music sessions where he would be playing the bassoon for us in the evenings to restore a bit of calm in that bungalow, as all of us sort of felt very out of our comfort zone at that time. It was then, I think, the usual that everybody went through. You got issued with uniforms that didn't fit. You got to carry a metal trunk back to your bed. One of my best friends from varsity had developed some viral infection in his arm, and he actually was unable to use the one arm, and it started the week of us going to the military, because on the Friday we'd been to buy all the requirements, and on Monday when we went to the army, he could hardly use his left arm. So the rest of us had to pitch in and help carry an extra metal trunk. Spent a couple of days playing cards in the queues, getting ourselves very noticed as the English-speaking side of the camp, and everybody playing cards in the queues the whole time and being fairly unconcerned. We had a Greek lieutenant that was taking a pharmacist that was taking our training, but by Wednesday, everybody had to choose some sort of a sport, and I suddenly realized that between my friends, everybody else had made a point of saying that they were something special as far as sports was concerned. The one was suddenly became a marathon runner, and all sorts of stuff like that. And I found myself on a Wednesday afternoon with sports with no easy escape, and would be allocated to whatever was happening. Looking at these red brick windows and buildings and the sort of red parade ground, I looked at this lot and I thought, this is not for me. I'm not going to enjoy this place. I need to get out of here. It was about the Thursday that Special Forces came to recruit, specifically the 7 Medical Battalion guys. One of the operator guys that they brought with was a doctor called John van Dongen. Now, John was about 2 years ahead of me in medical school, and he'd been an intern down at Addington. And myself and a friend of mine had done a month-long medical session there at Addington, where we'd got to know John quite well, going surfing together in the mornings and spending the day running around the hospital. So I knew John quite well, and was really impressed when I saw these fit-looking guys doing their thing, plus offering me an escape from Klipdrift. And the story was, well, you join us, we train, you do what we tell you, and the rest of the time you can spend in living at home, in working in the government hospital and specialty of your choice. So it was a no-brainer. There was hardly we had to do some physical tests, but we'd prepared for it, so it was really no big deal. Remember, quite a few guys came short on the pull-ups that had wanted to volunteer, but in the end, I think we were about 22 recruits. It was about one of the biggest groups that they'd ever taken. Was the year that I went. So we all got issued with uniforms, because at that stage we was just wearing overalls, but you weren't allowed to leave camp on overalls. So they had to suddenly had to find browns for us, and we were off to Pretoria and getting ourselves in there and sort of suddenly on the first weekend away in the military, we had pass and we were allowed to go home. So Friday afternoon we went home, told to be back Sunday evening sometime. Training starts on Monday. Now, the Monday morning was interesting in the military and specifically with us. Things always got interesting. We had two captains and a corporal that was in charge of our group. The one was Captain William Matlow, who eventually became commanding officer of the unit. And at that time, William needed, I think, one more course to qualify as an operator. And he was still had his own ideas. And Quentin Coetzee, who was also quite big in survival and all of that, was the other captain involved with us. But Monday morning, we were all quite keen and thought this is really an interesting day. And we'll get up early and start making beds the way we'd been shown at Kliptrif and get going. We'd been told to get up, I think, at 5, and we were all up at about 4:30, busy with the beds and the stuff. And the next thing, there was like just a bunch of explosions outside the bungalow and inside our bungalow. And I just remember looking, we'd been allocated into rooms, and my basics partner was sort of looking in surprise at his iron, thinking, did the iron explode or what was going on? But Captain Matlow decided to throw some flashbangs around. Now, of course, this being 1986, you weren't allowed to throw flashbangs in a military base without prior permission. So it caused absolute chaos, and they actually got called in because of this. But after this sort of, I think they explained to us what was going to happen. We would have our 3 months basics. Then we would have the option of going to the pre-selection, which was the first step of going on the operator cycle. But by that time, because of the number of us and the fact that they'd found the war was needing more of us and trying to put the whole lot on the operator cycle, they ended up with nobody to do the work. They decided that from that year we would start our own internal training cycle, which later became formalized and was the cycle that some of the doctors would have told you about. That the object of the whole exercise was that you had to be competent and confident to operate with any of the unit's clients, which meant that whether you were allocated to a special forces group, 3-2 battalion, parachute battalion, or anything else, you had to fit in, and they wouldn't need to look after you. They wouldn't need to. You would operate as a member of the team and not need looking after or any special care. And so for this, the point was you had to be as fit as them, and you had to be able to use whatever was necessary to stay alive to the point when you would be required, if you were, to apply your medical skills. So the idea was that they would develop their own internal cycle, but at that stage, the internal cycle was in its infancy, and they were still deciding what it was going to be. And in that year, you were allowed to make choices of the courses and the various training you wanted to undergo. I was due to go on to the Pathfinder course, but because I got out of cycle with the parachute course, in the end I never went. And by the time I wanted to rejoin, the requirement of the war was such that they didn't allow us to run around into anything else. So the what everybody was had the choice of which side of whether you wanted to be on the A track or the B track. The A track would entail the full operator training, which would take you away for about a full year, whereas the others, the training would be done largely around the area, and you would end up having more time at home and more time at the hospitals. So I and the other part of it was that going on the full training, it was accepted that you would be a fairly strong swimmer, which I wasn't. And this sort of very, very early made the decision for me that I probably would be going on the B track and not trying to get into Navy diving and all of that sort of thing. We did our basics at Vertrekkerhoogte. Then we had a corporal that was supposed to look after us. And it went fairly well for the first week or two. And the corporal, it is, I think, fairly daunting to be an 18-year-old corporal and you've got 21 fully qualified doctors who've just finished their internship, all being fairly confident, having volunteered for a unit like this, all being a little bit full of shit. So he lasted 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, we had the guys had him sorted out that they would pay for certain things, and he would the truck would pick us up at places where we wanted to be picked up. And we felt that things like making our beds every morning and having inspection, and that was just a waste of time. That was not what we needed. So we stopped doing inspections and stuff, all of which worked well for a while. But of course, our guys were very much looked at by, and I think a little bit jealous, with a little bit of jealousy from other parties around. And an officer from another section of SAMS walked into our bungalows one morning to find no beds made and everything, clothes lying all over the place. We promptly reported us, and William and Quentin got rid of the corporal, and they took over inspection themselves. So life got a bit more military style for a while. Our basic day was an hour or two of PT or running in the mornings, then breakfast, then some lectures, and after the lectures, we would all pile on. We had one of these off-white Mercedes trucks. We'd pile on the Mercedes truck, and we'd all go to the old 1 mil, which they'd set up as a gym. And we would have an hour or two in the gym, lunch, some military training in the afternoon, and that sort of ended up being our day. And depending on whether there was something they wanted us to do after hours, we would have something in the evenings. Our morning runs were quite good. We would run out from Vertrekkerhoogte past Speskop, often out down all the way down to the highway and back. So it was anything between 10 and 20 Ks, depending on how that felt. Our two training officers was an interesting mix. If Quentin came for the training, he arrived in his PT shorts and he ran with us. If William arrived, he would arrive in the military vehicle, and he would drive behind us and watch us running. But with all of this and with the gym and that, we got extremely fit. It was actually well planned, and we had, I think, 0 injuries. Everybody got through to a point where we were comfortably running 21 Ks in boots, running with poles, 21 Ks, that sort of stuff, basically on a daily basis. And with working out, the unit had its own marbles, which were slightly heavier than the marbles that Parachute Battalion and those were using, also part of their training. And we gradually learned the jippo tricks around the marbles, and we got fit with the poles and all the rest. So by the time that basics ended, we were really well prepared for whatever we needed to do. And of our 21 guys that had gone in. Only 2 guys were not with us anymore. One had been transferred to one of the specialty medical specialty groups, and the other one, we never actually found out what happened to him. He just one morning we got up and he wasn't there. We never ever saw him again, and never heard anything of him again. But so our group went through this. We had at the end of it, on some of the photos that I've shown you, we had a formal dinner. And after formal dinner, we all piled in our cars and went down to Durban for the pre-selection to join our guys. I knew I wasn't going to do that, so we simply adjourned to the beach, whereas the other guys that wanted went in for their to try the pre-selection. I think of our group, 2 perhaps of the guys that wanted to do it, only 2 guys didn't actually qualify to go to Dukuduku for the first part of the operator's selection. Those of us who planned not to go all spent the afternoon on the beach, had a couple of beers on the beach, then decided that we would go to the restaurant, all of us together with the guys who'd done the pre-selection. So the whole group sat around at a pizza place in the center of Durban, had a couple of beers and pizzas, and at the end of the evening, in the usual bravado of the new and young military guys that thought we were 7 foot tall and walked on water, we decided at 11 o'clock at night, after an evening in the pizza place, there was no point in driving back to the Bluff. We would just go back to Pretoria. So we piled in our cars at 11 o'clock at night and drove back to Pretoria, where we promptly arrived at 6 o'clock the next morning. And as we drove into Voortrekkerhoogte, another car drove into the back of us. After having survived multiple exciting moments from that trip down, back up from Durban, I got quite a bad whiplash from that accident, and actually went to the 1 mil casualty, where another medical friend of mine from Wits was working in the 1 mil casualty. So he said to me, "Well, this is not good. Let me book you off for a week or 2." I said to him, "But son, you can't book me off for a week or 2. We're on to the next phase of training. I came here to get something to treat my sore neck, not to kick me out of training." And I think this is the message, or the difference. And you talk to people, other guys that were in the military, and the experience was completely different. The guys I worked with for my 2 years were all people who wanted to be there. They were all volunteers. Everybody had an attitude of, we've got something to do, let's go and do it. Instead of the attitude of, well, let's do as little as possible and let's be as negative as possible about it. And that, I think, was the whole difference between having been a medic in 7 Med and having been a medic somewhere else, was that whole attitude of, well, we volunteered for this. We want to be here. So anyway, I got some pain tablets and some anti-inflammatories, and moved on to our next course there. The one thing I forgot to tell you, Koos, is before our last PT session, one morning before we went down to the pre-selection, we did our normal run and we came back on to the parade ground, and just doing our jog, and we were really feeling strong. And William was taking the PT that morning, and he took us in and he said, you guys have got a bit of an attitude. And we said, listen, there's nothing you can do to us that can hurt us. And he grabbed the poles and he grabbed the marbles, and about 2 hours later he got bored and said, okay, we'll just go for breakfast. There's nothing we can do. And that was who we were at that time. There was nothing you could do to us that we thought could scare us. Of course, that wasn't true, but that's what we thought. Then we went, our next section of training was foreign weapons, which Willem undertook. We went to Potchefstroom to the armor base there. We lived in our bivvies in the bush, and we did weapons training, the Tokarev pistol, the AKs, a variety of AKs, and a variety of the foreign machine guns until we were, and the mag, until everybody was quite comfortable with that. All the Rambo stuff, firing it from the hip and firing it from all positions. I mean, we had endless ammo. We just spent the whole days shooting with that. We all got opportunities to use the Snotneers. We got opportunities to use the RPG, the rocket-propelled grenades, firing until we felt confident and competent, and the guys were able to be a number 1 or a number 2 on the RPG and hit what we were shooting at. There was no limit to the amount of ammo that we had. We also used the 60mm commando mortar, which was basically a tube with a leather strap that had numbers on it that allowed you to sort of judge the distance that you were going to use. Did a couple of hours of training with this. Excuse me. And there's a couple of probably a kilometer or half a kilometer away. We had an armored vehicle, old armored vehicle, parked on a hill that we were shooting at, and we kept dropping the mortar bombs a little bit far, and eventually William said, "Just lift the tube, stop messing around." So the guy holding it on lifted the tube, and we all looked up, and we all saw the mortar bomb hanging in the air above us. And old William just looked up and he said, "Hardloop." And we scattered out, and the bomb came down right where we'd been sitting. But we got through miss without any miss, and then we did some house clearing, learning to use hand grenades in the there was some ruins on there that we were allowed to work inside, and of course, William, still being young and strong in those days, the usual thing: chuck the grenade through the window and we pull your head out of the way. Except that these were not new buildings, and a piece of the hand grenade came through one of the walls and almost took him out there. We survived this. By that time, we'd all felt that we were pretty well trained with what we did. The one thing we didn't train on was the surface-to-air missile, the shoulder-held SAM. And the couple of us who went to 3-2 Battalion later actually got trained on this. And it was an interesting story, being in... At the time, we spent many hours in the base. We had 2 groups of doctors rotating into the field and out. And those of us sitting in the base asked, "Well, this is here and we are using it. We've not been trained. Want to show us how we use it and the lock-on and all the rest?" As it happened on the day, there was, while we were playing around with this, a C1 came past that it was on some sort of a mission, of course, and this being a couple of 100 kilometers inside Angola, it would not have been something that the military wanted to talk about. We didn't realize that using the SAM would, for a lock-on on a plane coming past, would trigger a response inside the aircraft. And the investigation eventually found out who'd been involved in causing chaos up in the aircraft coming past in the middle of nowhere. And that was how we got our SAM training. After training in Potchefstroom on the foreign weapons, we went back to Pretoria, and those of us who decided to, were still uninjured and everything else, got allocated then to go to Parachute Battalion for the PT course as the first part of our further training. We were allocated our bungalow in there. We were slightly apart from the troops, and we were treated very well by Parachute Battalion. They never messed with us for inspections or anything else as they did with the youngsters who were on the course with us. We were with Charlie Company in that's the PT course that we were on. So arrived on Sunday, plowed ourselves in, got everything sorted, and got our section of the bungalow. Monday morning, we started the PT course. PT course was a straightforward 10 days of PT from 6 in the morning till 6 in the evening. If you survived, you were uninjured at the end of that, you qualified to go on to parachute training. The interesting part of it, or the psychologically interesting part of it, was there was no time that you weren't allowed to quit. Whenever it looked like you were struggling, or whenever anybody moaned, the answer from the training officer was very simple. Well, just go. There's no problem. You just get returned to unit. You just go to the ambulance, tell the medics that you're done, and they'll take you back to the admin office, and the admin office will fly you out and send you home. You don't have to be here. You can leave at any stage of any day that you feel you've now had enough. You leave, and that, again, as I said, was the interesting part of being in that unit, is that everybody who was there was a volunteer, and everybody actually wanted to be there. So it was the effort and input from everybody, the youngsters from 16, 17 to us doctors who were by that time on average about 25 years old. Everybody was committed to try and survive this. And the one thing we struggled to understand was, especially with some of the boxing and wrestling sessions, how the youngsters almost beat each other out of the course. That they couldn't understand that it was about survival to the end of the 10 days. You had to be there after 10 days. Not everybody who got there could be there. You didn't need to knock your buddy off the course for you to survive. As it was, I think we started with 160 volunteers at the start of the PT course on Monday morning, and I think 79 of us finished 10 days later. That came through the 10 days of training. I will send you the video sometime. It was basically hour-long sessions that carried you different types of PT. You would spend an hour rolling around across the field. You would spend an hour carrying your buddy or being carried. You would spend an hour doing push-ups, or you would spend an hour doing marbles. It was all structured like a classroom that you moved on from one exercise to the next. One of their unique inventions was an open-air gym called the Patron, and everybody competed against each other going through the various training things. It was like a couple of rows next to each other. And this wasn't just another period where you would spend an hour in the gym. And the meals were very good, although you learned very quickly not to eat very much during the meal, because right after a meal, you would be running a quick 15 Ks or doing an hour's push-ups, which didn't sit well with a big meal. So we learned very quickly not to overdo the food. With this level of intensity of the training, the guys started hurting very quickly. And we started... some of the doctors started getting injured. A lot of the youngsters started getting injured. Quite a few of the youngsters decided this was not what they thought it would be, and they're not what they signed up for. And as I say, that's where we started losing guys. I had my first boxing match in there was against one of the Portuguese guy from the sort of south of Joburg. And it was an interesting experience while we tried to see who could knock who off the course, but both of us got through it, and it was called a draw. The week went on like this. It was interesting. You went to bed at night, sort of almost too scared to go to sleep, because you would close your eyes and the next moment you would be back in your PT kit going to the next morning's PT again. And this would just carry on. And it was day one, day two. The youngsters had their little marks on the wall that they would cross off as they survived each day. Friday of the first week there was a run with poles and tires, and although we worked with people, we partnered with the other doctors, and on my group that was there still, we had a pharmacist, a health inspector, and I think we were about 3 doctors by the Friday. So we teamed up for our Friday run with the poles and the tire. But what we'd not clicked yet by then was that you needed 4 guys of the same size to run with a pole, and the pharmacist was quite a bit shorter than the rest of us. So we ended up completely out of sync for this run, and really struggling with it. And sort of by midway through, our group of 2 doctors, a fly spy and a pharmacist, were just about right at the back and really getting fed up with this. At which point, one of the training sergeants, who we had not developed a good relationship with, arrived and started ordering us around and trying to make us do extra PT and stuff. And we sort of looked at this lot, and the four of us looked at him and we said, you know what? Here's your pole. And we threw the pole down and we said, we're done. We're leaving. Fortunately, at that point, one of the senior guys arrived and he said, listen, we're not having this. We're not having the 4 medics off the course at this point in the game. We made a deal that we would leopard crawl with our pole on our backs for a distance, and then after that we would be back on the run. And I think we finished about 3rd or something out of the 20 groups that were running by the end of that. We decided to stay in base on the weekend, did a bit of a run on the Sunday just to keep the muscles going. The next week was more of the same. It was absolutely soul-destroying, knowing that you were in for 8 to 10 hours of PT the next day. It was going to be the same as yesterday, except something was going to hurt more than it did yesterday. By about we'd wrapped our feet and tried to toughen our feet up before this, because the amount of the mileage we were doing was destroying on your feet, and we ended up with blisters all over despite being taped up with elastoplast and everything. And at the end of a day, everybody had to sit. You had to take your boots off, and the medics came through to see who had blisters, and they had their little syringes, and they would draw the fluid from the blister and inject the mercurochrome equivalent into it, which burnt like hell. But it was the best thing ever, because by the next morning that blister would be largely healed and you'd be running on it again. Sort of by the middle of that week, I actually developed very severe pain in my left leg, and was struggling. It warmed up after a bit, but I was really struggling to run in the mornings and to get going. And that first hour was absolute hell, which progressively got worse. But having by then that time survived 8 days of this, if you quit, you started from day one. There was no starting where you left off. So I was just not going to stop at this point. It just had to finish. So although every single day we ended up with Voltaren injections before and often in the morning and again at the end of the day, some pain tablets. Being doctors, we were able to manipulate the medics a little bit more for the Voltaren injections and that. But sort of by the Friday of this last second Friday of the PT course was the PT tests. And despite having survived to get there, you had to pass all of those tests before you actually qualified to move on to the jump course. So by the Friday morning, I could hardly walk. I was limping. I went to see the medics, got myself a Voltaren injection before that. One of the youngsters was actually on crutches that arrived for the last 3 point. They had started the day with a 3.2 run. And I think it had to be under 10 minutes or something in full kit, if I remember correctly. The guy who arrived on crutches did not manage to finish, but my leg loosened up enough for me to finish. Then we went through all the PT tests. The wall that we spoke about was one of these, and it was quite sad after 10 days of this to see how the wall had got into some guys' heads, and a couple of the guys could not get over this wall, despite the fact that you could probably on any other day of the week climb that wall with ease. We lined up after everything was done, and the training officer read out 6 names, and he said, "These guys are not entitled to stand with the rest of you. They did not pass the tests." And it was a very degrading way of getting rid of guys who'd survived 10 days of training with us but could not get through the PT tests at the end of this. But as I say, that means that we survived. The about 70-something of us who survived of the 169 that had started out, all qualified. We had this was before lunch. We had lunch, and after lunch we started. They moved us into the hangar for the start of the jump course. By this time of the day, I could hardly walk, and as we started doing our little jumps out of the mock-ups, the sergeant in charge said to me, "Dok, jy kan nie eers loop nie. Wat dink jy doen jy hierso?" And I had a look and a bit of a get together with some of the officers, and they said, "Listen, go and have this leg x-rayed. You've passed the PT course. If you need to go off medically, you can get on one of the other jump courses. You don't need to repeat the PT course." So went back to Pretoria, sat in the queue at 1 mil on Monday morning for orthopedic surgery, for the orthopedic surgeons. Had my x-rays of my leg, got shouted at by the nurse captain for looking at my own x-rays, because by that time we were all still candidate officers. We weren't even officers yet. We'd had the white margarine straps on our epaulets instead of the officers' stuff. They looked at it and they said, "Well, it looks like a stress fracture," and they stuck me in a cast. And went back to the unit and said, "Well, guys, I'm here. What do you want me to do? Because I'm now on crutches with a leg in a cast." Which, until you've done it, you can't believe what happens when you were at peak fitness of your life and you suddenly hobbling on crutches. It was extremely difficult, and but then they said to me, "Well, there's nothing much for you to do around the unit. Go find yourself a hospital and whatever specialty you feel like doing, and let us know when your leg gets better, and then we'll find something for you to do again." Because I'd done some extra anesthetics, and I'd done the anesthetic elective down at Addington before, and I knew the prof at Baragwanath quite well, I just went home and spoke to the prof, and he said, "Yeah, no problem. Why don't you just join us at Barra, and we'll get you in the system there." So I went into anesthetics at Baragwanath Hospital for about 4 weeks while my leg was in the cast. learnt and next level of giving anesthetics. After which time the army phoned me and said that, oh, we found a course for you guys. You're going to be doing the battle handling course at Parachute Battalion. Okay. They decided that Parachute Battalion needed an airborne battle handling course, which would be for company commanders. Discussed teaching showing the guys what had happened in the previous parachute operations worldwide. And they'd never done it before, so they would load it up and they'd sort of see how it goes. I think this was 2 to 3 weeks or something like that, and we got guys from the mechanized, because the paratroopers would work with mech infantry. We got Colonel Breitenbach, I think Miguel Alexander was there, some guys from mech infantry was there, and specialists in the group all came and lectured us. It was extremely academically intense with huge books of stuff that we had to learn. Having come through medical school, that was not particularly stressful to us, although it was completely out of our field and comfort zone. But we did case studies, we did Entebbe, we did our own Kasinga attack, and a couple of the Bridge Too Far, Arnhem airborne attack and those. And with the local experts, we discussed the good, the bad, and the ugly of the various stuff. We ended up building sand models of what for attacks and having to plan attacks and write plans around attacks and around support of mech infantry and the airborne guys. So this took us a couple of weeks, and we did quite well through all of this. This was my 3 buddies who'd done the jump course, the fly spy, the pharmacist, and one of the doctors, because they were the only ones who actually had survived through all of it at the end. We did this. The health inspector was not the happiest of us all with the level of academic work and the amount of stuff that we had to learn off by heart for this military course. And one Sunday morning, we stayed in the barracks in the officers' mess to study for the stuff. And the guy used to get a bit depressed. He'd been a Southwest wrestler, so he was slightly bigger than the rest of us. And he decided to get into a little bit of wrestling there. And being bigger than us, it didn't end well for any of us until I put the rifle butt to his head, which sorted out that discussion. We finished it. We all passed, did quite well on the course. Got sent back to the unit and spent a few days back at Barra. At least now I could start running and all of that again. Then I returned to do my jump course, and I actually joined my original friends who'd gone on the operators course and were still on it, because we were in cycle with the operator training course that was on the same jump course that I was on in the end. It was sort of the one that Johan Prins describes in his book Breed Apart, was the jump course that I actually then joined. Did all the jumps. It was quite good. It was an interesting experience the first time you look out of that door and you sort of see the Free State out there, and you know that this is about to happen. Always get those butterflies in the stomach to the last day when I jumped a couple of years ago. You still feel that, but you're under pressure from your peers, and none of us ever backed off in the door. We were on the jump course also with the Southwest paratroopers, which was an interesting mix of people. And at least one got in the door of the C1. One of them got stuck and did the star, holding on to all sides of it, not wanting to go out. And the dispatchers pushed him out the door with boots and the rest. Also, on the when we were on doing the tailgating off the C-130, one of the guys walked out, and you walk out about, what is it, about a 2, 3, 4 meters that the tailgate is open. You walk on your own, and you sort of look with the Free State on your left, right, and front. And the one guy got to the front, and he decided that he's got somewhere else to go, and it's not going out. So he just stood there, and the rest of us ended up walking around him to do our jumping. But it was good fun, and I was fortunate never got injured. Learned all the tricks of holding the kit on your foot and all of that for the jump. Qualified as a static line paratrooper, and went back to spend some time at my hospital again, which was a nice routine that I'd got used to. And then I started getting used to the way that 7Med worked, because one morning I got a phone call. Angela Riley was our controller, and Angela was sitting at Spescop, and she said, "Oh, just pop in tomorrow morning. We've got something for you to do." At this time, sort of sitting at the hospital, just doing anesthetics and socializing. My buddies from Klipdrift, the Wits guys that I'd gone with, that they'd gone into, were then by that time based in Pretoria, and all living back in Joburg. They started canoeing. So in the late afternoons, we would all go rowing at Zoo Lake and that area there. Spend a couple of hours paddling around in the water and just generally relaxing and waiting for this to pass. So Angela phones and said, "Andre, come in." Went in there, and she said, "Okay, just pack some kit. You need to be down at one recce on the bluff tomorrow. You're joining them for advanced river training." And okay, well, what does that mean? Well, not to worry, they'll tell you. So got in my car and I toddled down to one recce, clawed in there. And they said, "Oh, okay, no, we're just going to row the Orange River, and you're just giving medical support for the team there." So the next morning, we got into some Unimogs. I was allocated to the Tiffy on the Tiffy Unimog, and we took a couple of Unimogs with that had the machine guns on, but all covered up for traveling in country. I think we were a group of about 20, 25 guys that ended up driving from Duku to Fields Drift on Unimogs. This was a couple of days worth of trip. But if you've never done it, there is no feeling like when you've come across having sat in the sun for days and suddenly you get that cold wind off the west coast that hits you when you get off the hills there. And we took the Unimogs to Fields Drift, and at Fields Drift we set up the Clippers, the collapsible canoes that Special Forces used for most of their operations. And being the military, we then packed our canoes and we rowed upstream for 3 days. So we paddled up from Fields Drift from Grasdrift to Fields Drift. 3 days upstream, had to carry the canoes up some of the waterfalls and that sort of stuff. And having reached Fields Drift, we managed to find a place to buy a few cool drinks, and then had a 6 days downstream to the sea. And we eventually took the Clippers out at the bridge where the Orange flows into the sea, was where we stopped. It was quite intense, and several places we broke quite a few Clippers on the rapids and everything else there, but nobody got injured, and it was quite it was an experience. At sort of halfway down, we came across the Felix Unite civvies in their little Davy Crockett boats, staring in surprise at this group coming past. And that day I said to myself, one day I'll do this not with the military. And I actually managed to get back there with both my kids individually to do the Orange River with the Felix Unite group. And my kids have all been back since to do it on their own without me. So it was a long-term investment, the river training. After that, went back to Wanreki, and was told, "Oh, okay, Doc, you'll just be one of the. We've got the parade tomorrow morning. You'll be officer of the parade on that side there, please." Which, fortunately, we'd done enough training with William and Quentin to actually be able to participate in the normal morning parade, although that had not been a big part of our joy. This was now around November of '86, went back, spent December actually at home. Early January, the phone rang, and it was Engela again saying, "Oh, guys, just pop in tomorrow morning. We need you to come for a briefing." And this was different. This time, went into some of the more inside areas, and there was a whole lot of maps of Namibia and Angola on the walls. Looking at the short explanation of, we've got a couple of doctors already supporting 3-2 battalion. It's time that they get a relief. You guys will be relieving them for a couple of inside Angola. Okay, how long is this going to be? Well, it shouldn't be too bad. A week or two, just something like that, just while they finish off the operation. And what kit do we need to take? Nothing really much. Just the real basic toiletries. You don't really need to take anything with. And we were newbies and not understanding anything what they were saying. So next morning with a backpack, we were on the Flossie, and it was actually not a Flossie. My first trip to Southwest Africa, we flew the SASFA 707, although it was so small that you stuck your knees were around your ears. And it was the arrival, I think what everybody had, it was that Vietnam War picture where you're sort of sitting in the dark inside of this plane and the door opens and you have this sensory overwhelming flash of bright light with the sun coming off the white sand and all of that, and you sort of never lose that first impression of having arrived in Southwest Africa. We then got introduced to the normal military, and that nobody knew where we were supposed to go. Nobody knew who we were or what we were supposed to do. But we were four doctors, and the other guys, having come through the Afrikaans universities, they knew the doctors at the local hospital. So we simply popped into the local hospital, told the guys, "Well, we're here. Nobody knows where we're supposed to go, what we're supposed to do. What should we do?" And they said, "Well, why don't we just go out for dinner and a beer?" Which we then did, and arrived back after a festive evening, realizing that we'd not clawed in anywhere and we had no place to sleep. But being doctors, we simply popped into an empty ward in the hospital, which worked quite well. There were nicely made beds, and we just got in there, had a good night's sleep. The next morning, one of the nurses popped in to do a temperature on the first guy nearest the door, which then caused a fair amount of chaos when the local matron found out that we'd simply appropriated one of her wards. From there, they actually found out that we were supposed to be at Buffalo, and the truck had arrived, and they piled us all on a truck. And we moved off, got into Buffalo. We clawed in there, got that real newbie look for, what do you mean you brought no kit and you've got no rifles and no anything? What were you guys thinking? But obviously at Buffalo, they had everything. We got issued with the 3-2 camouflage uniforms, issued with R4 rifles, sleeping bags, the back mochilas, the 3-2 backpacks and everything. And the webbing, and ended up just with our own, still kept our own boots. Apart from the boots, we were fully kitted out as 3-2 troops. And we were then asked, well, we need somebody to stay at Buffalo to be the base doctor for a while. Which one of you want that? And of course, nobody wanted that. Everybody wanted to get on the helicopter and go into the front. We were new then. That evening, a Puma arrived, and all of us with our kit were piled onto the Puma. And it was already pitch dark when we left. And I remember sitting with the open door and my legs out the door, and I was thinking, these are funny looking clouds that I'm looking at. Yeah, and then the next thing we realized that it wasn't funny looking clouds. The Puma was about 10 foot off the ground, and it was trees coming past that we were looking at in the moonlight there. After 3-2 was operating around 200 to 300 kilometers inside then. So after a while, there were 3 fires in the field. The chopper went down. We swapped. The doctors, a group of docs came out, had a quick hello, how are you? And one of the doctors there sort of pushed us, shoved a camera in our hand and said, "Oh, here's the camera I brought. There's still a couple of photos on it. Why don't you fill it up and bring it home when you come?" We went in, we're taken from the landing area to, we 3-2 had built a temporary base inside Angola, and they built actually wooden huts and their own little wooden gym. And at that time, they had 4 companies there, which was about 85 guys to a company, 2 working 2 weeks inside, patrolling in Angola, looking for SWAPO or anything like that, and 2 companies in the base for 2 weeks on rest and recuperation and being healed. So 2 of us were allocated to stay in the base for 2 weeks, and the other 2 went out with the companies to the front. In the base, we just did the normal sick parade and looking at treating some of the locals and all of that. Sat around doing not very much, training, doing a bit of work in their open air gym that they'd built, getting ourselves kitted out with whatever weapons and stuff we needed, draw as much ammo as you think you may need. We had quite a chuckle. One of our members decided to draw himself some hand grenades, while the rest of us said, well, we're not really, we'll stick to some ammo for the R4s and leave it at that. The next sort of rotation cycle, I went in with Keith Evans and Sergeant Prince van der Merwe was allocated to their group. We were then issued with our first meeting with the Portuguese rations. This was completely different from the South African rat packs. It was stuff like chili con carne and all sorts of Portuguese food, which was quite nice compared to some of the South African stuff we'd been getting. Problem with the first time that you went in, being understanding that we were going to be in the field for 2 weeks. So you had to pack your rations for 2 weeks, plus you had your medical bag, your rifle, your ammo, 2 weeks worth of food, as well as we carried 2 2-liter water bottles, and then your small water bottle as well. So this was the load that we had, not being sure what you were likely to eat for 2 weeks, but knowing that if you ran short, you would go hungry. We probably overcated a little bit, and there was a horrendous weight on that backpack, and the food didn't even all fit in. There was a little bag with tins hanging out of my backpack the first time I went. The weight of the pack was such that for the first 2 days it was difficult to stand up with it. So we used to make a point of sitting down next to a tree so that you could actually pull yourself up after sitting down with trying to get up with this pack. In the medical bag that we were issued with was the 301 Nimola bag. This bag consisted of 2 parts. The one part was your medical and resuscitation, which had a drip in it and all the medicines, bandages, and the rest. And the other half, which could zip off, was basically a complete operating theatre with knives, saws, all the clips and clamps and stuff that you would need to do a small operation in the field. So, but the size of this combined bag was too much to go into a backpack, apart from being too heavy. So what you had to do was to figure out what you thought you were likely to do, and then combine all of this into one half of the bag so that you were able to carry this. So what we did was we would move the stuff that you could do small suturing, resuscitation, normal ills and pains around the field into the bag that you carried, and we kept the more surgical side of it. We kept separate, as it was a lot of weight and a lot of metal instruments. And this would be transported as needed, if and when it was needed. So that stayed in the camp, and we carried the one. So in the backpack, we first had this 301 medical half of the 301 medical bag, and then your food and everything else went on top of this. We'd been trained on how to work with the battle jackets that we had, and the 3-2 battle jacket was very similar to the Nimola one that we had been issued with at Special Forces. You could carry your 4 magazines, you could carry bandages in the one side, and then it would take a 2-liter water bottle and some food in it. The idea being that you could carry your backpack, but the battle jacket would always be with you. And in the event that things came unstuck and you were running, you could leave the backpack, but you would have water and food and some basic medical supplies in the battle jacket that you were carrying. Coming into the field with 3-2 in the evenings, fortunately, the sand was quite soft, because in the evening, before you set up your bivvy for your sleeping bag, you would dig basically a sort of a shallow trench or a shallow grave for yourself, in that in the event that you got revved overnight, at least you would basically be below ground. So your bivvy was pitched over this hole that you dug every evening to sleep in, that would offer some fighting protection in the event. So we'd been trained that you would sleep with your battle jacket and your rifle and everything inside that bivvy, that you knew where it was and that you would be able to grab it in the dark without making light, in the event of there being an attack on our temporary base where we slept in the evening, that you could get your rifle, you could get your boots, and you could get your battle jacket. If we had to run, you would leave the backpack behind, but you could survive on what was in that until things regrouped and got itself sorted out. So this was our daily routine, that we would get up in the morning, have breakfast, have a class stand, have breakfast, Then we'd walk. Every hour there was a 5-minute break or a smoke break or so. And then after, we had a lunch break where we lay around for about an hour and did a bit of reading, and there was a couple of torn books that circulated amongst the troops and everybody else that you had some reading material at lunchtime. We'd patrol the whole the afternoon again. Just before dark, we would go. We would have our supper, and after that, we would do the normal loop to go into the evening TB, dig your hole to sleep in, and then after that, spend the night in there. As a doctor, I was with the sort of headquarters section with the captain and the sergeant, and I was also excused from having to stand guard with, which was quite pleasant. So at least if nothing happened at night, I could sleep. So most nights you took the boots off to air your feet and that. On the nights that our recce unit went out to look for swapper camps and stuff, you would sleep with your boots on in the event of some of them getting into trouble and things coming unstuck very quickly. So some nights we slept with boots on, most nights we slept with boots off. This went on, and then we were given the every day. Keith would be talking to headquarters, and they would be telling us which way they wanted us to patrol and where to look and all the rest. There was a swapper base somewhere in our area that we were looking for. This was somewhere in the area of near Kasinga that we were patrolling. And the one time they told us, okay, you guys go down here. It was quite thick bush, and that we were walking in all the time, and it was fairly difficult. Not always a lot of water, and sometimes we got quite close to the end of the 2 bottles of water, because you needed 2 liters of water for the per day, basically, and we only carried 2 days worth. So every second day we needed to find water somewhere at least. And being the doctor, you could not be the guy to run out of water. So you had to sort of make sure that you were keeping in with everybody else. But we must have been close to the end of our 2-week patrol. We ended up with the guys having found the base in the area of what was then called Kasumbi, and think that the plans were made for a 3-2 battalion attack on that base, and they brought in the other 2 groups as well. Our doctor who came in from the forward base brought the other half of our 301 bags, and so in the event that, as we were now expecting trouble, they brought in more medical stuff as well as the other half of the bags in the event that we would need that. The whole lot of us all got together, and we sat down with the commandant, who was then who's in charge of the area and was busy planning the attack on this base that we were expecting to hit in the near future there. Now, we'd been through battle handling, and so I remember sitting in that briefing and thinking, this is not really what they taught us at the course in Bloemfontein of airborne battle handling. But these guys have been doing it for a while. I suppose you just keep quiet. They're not going to appreciate input from the doctor. They've been doing it. Let's just keep quiet and see what happens. Effectively, we felt we were expecting around 200 to 250 swappers in the base. We were 4 groups of 80, so about 300 of us, and not nearly the type of ratio you needed for an attack. So we wouldn't have people for stopper groups at the back, and they decided that we would use our mortars as stoppers at the back instead of having troops out there. Got everybody together, and we decided that the attack would be on the morning, I think it was the end of January somewhere. Got everybody in for the night march. Now, to move in, we dropped all the backpacks were all dropped, the mochilas at the vehicles, and we would go in only with our medical bags and the battle jackets, as we were expecting a 24-hour period away from our vehicles and the protection group. One of the 3-2 medics took my the metal part of my 301 bag, and I took my the resuscitation part. And we then got in round about late in the evening, must have been 8 or 10 o'clock at night. We got up for a night march into the base area we expected Kasumbi to be, and we expected to make the attack at first light. Night march in an area with no moon, no anything, is always an interesting experience. And every now and then we lost each other, and you would lose the guy in front of you. You could hardly see him. You almost had to have your hand on his shoulder to be able to see him. The black troops were obviously difficult to see, and we'd all been completely decked out in black is beautiful, as we were every day in 3-2 battalion, to try not to be to stick out like a sore thumb at any stage as the 3 whites in the 85 black troops. It was an endless march, often the group breaking up, 300 guys marching in a moonless night was not easy to keep together. But and we didn't arrive before dawn as we'd been planning. And round about just before, as the dawn was breaking, everybody, we arrived where we thought we should be, and everybody set up in an assault line and a second line. And I sort of, as I was looking around, I saw I was next to Sergeant Van der Merwe that I was with my company, and I said to him, Van, but we're the assault line. I thought I was supposed to be in the support line. He said to me, Doc, this is why you know us. And so we got ourselves set up and everything, and Sergeant Mac was the recce commander at the time, and he went up to do a final inspection before we came in, and found out that what we thought was the base was actually empty and unoccupied, and we were not in the place where we wanted to be. Going further, though, he did actually find the Kasumbi base that we've been looking for, but we were not set up in the area, and it was already dawn. Dawn had already broken by then, and there was no way we could advance on that with any element of surprise. So it was decided that we would lie over for 24 hours and get into position, do the attack the next morning. This obviously complicated everything because everybody had 1 bottle of water with them, food for 1 day, and we had 300 people sitting in the middle, 300 kilometers inside Angola, trying to not be picked up by the locals, and surviving in that heat with the food that we thought we would be having after the attack and not before. So by the evening of that day, after lying around under the trees the whole day, everybody's food was gone, most people's water was gone, and everybody was getting a little bit grumpy, but got a couple of hours sleep, and at about 2 a.m, everybody got up, and we started moving into the position for the assault lines for the new base that Sergeant Mac had found. The Commandant was in charge. Captain Mac, who was killed at Quito, was one of the 3-2 captains with us who was arranging our walk. It was decided that we would advance in a line along the road that led into the base. So, but moving into position, it was a sand road, and they didn't want us to step in the road to get tracks all over this road. So Captain Mac was standing at this road, directing it, and as myself and one of the other doctors got to it, we got this volley of Portuguese telling us not to step in the road, which of course we didn't understand. So my fellow guy immediately stepped into the road, getting him Captain Mac, blow from Captain Mac with a magazine on top of his head and a real uitkak in Portuguese for why did you not listen to what I was saying. So I suppose our Black is Beautiful worked fairly well, but in the dark he didn't recognize us. We all moved into position. I was then in the support line, which we were supposed to be in, next to the Lieutenant Villiers de Vos, who I actually met quite recently, was the Luti that was the area that I was in. And as we started moving, got ourselves into position and moved in, started walking into the base, because this dawn was just breaking. Troops were fairly, well, nobody was talking, and it was fairly quiet as we were walking between the trees. Sort of suddenly at the front somewhere, the front guys had walked into an enemy patrol. There's a lot of discussion whether they knew we were there or not, but it was that sort of couple of loose shots, and then suddenly all hell broke loose, and everybody was shooting, and it was just you could just hear the rapid fire of the machine guns and the rest in the front. Everybody went to ground, trying to understand what was going on. We just had trees and also a line of our own troops in front of us, so there was nothing for us to shoot at. We were just lying down. But unfortunately, we were in one of their mortar pre-prepared sites. So their 120s were suddenly not 120s, their 80 millimeter mortar 82s were suddenly firing right on top of us, bursting amongst us and bursting in the trees. There were a couple of troops lying sort of some distance off from us, and the mortar bomb hit the tree above them, and those two were just killed instantly. Well, this was sort of carrying on, with the mortars around us and some shooting at the front. A troop arrived there, looking for me, and they're saying, listen, the docs on the other side doctors had been spread out amongst the lines so that we could each had a section, an area to cover for injuries there. So the troop arrived saying, Doc, the docs on the other side have got a badly wounded guy, and they want you there, please. So, well, okay, where do we go? Sort of, no, you move down this way, and by the big tree, you turn right, and that's where it is. And I said, listen, but I don't mind going, and I don't mind getting up in the middle of all of this going on around us, but there's no way I'm running in this on my own amongst these trees, and you're telling me there's a big tree that you've got to recognize as the big tree. I've got people shooting at us from the front. I've got guys on our side shooting the other way. Now you're wanting me to run in the middle of all of this. Everybody's wearing camo. You have no idea who's who. And at the big tree, I turn right and I'm looking for this guy. You show me where he is, and I'm happy to go. So the troop went with me, and it was one of the youngsters had been hit by the mortar. Both one arm and one leg had been completely mushed by this explosion, and he was bleeding profusely. The guys who were trying to resuscitate managed to get one drip up, and they were desperately trying to get another drip and trying to control the bleeding. It was complete chaos. We had dawn breaking around us. We had the mortars coming down. There were three of us trying to get drips up on this guy, trying to stop the bleeding on the one side. And we had one drip and we had a medic squeezing the drip to try and get as much fluid in and keep his pressures up as best we could. We were almost, it was basically bled out by that time. We were unable to get another drip up on him. And somewhere in the middle of this lot, the medic who was actually squeezing the drip, that drip came out. And right there, we lost the guy. And the sort of uniquely 3-2 part of it was that his father and his brother were in the same contact, and they were actually there at the time that we were trying to resuscitate this youngster. By this time, everything was still going bad around us. I went back to my position in the lines, and the troops were getting agitated with us being shot at and being unable to shoot back and moving. And the troops started getting up and shouting Avanza and moving forward. The whole group then, all of us then got up and started moving in for attacking the base. At this point, I sort of turned and said to my medic, who was carrying the other half of my 301 bag, well, let's go. And he just pointed at his leg, and he'd got shrapnel through the leg and was unable to, so I had to leave that part of the 301 bag with him. And I just carried the resus part with me as we went into the base. It was a very solid memories. Yeah, then as we moved through the base, and there was a booby trap in one of the food stores, and the guys were clearing it up, clearing the trenches. There was a couple of casualties on the other side as well. I found a medical bag, so I assume their medic either ran or was one of the casualties. And while we were busy clearing the base, we heard vehicles in the distance. And one of the questions that the 3-2 troops always asked was, what is the MiG response time and where's the nearest FAPLA base? So at this point, we weren't sure what was happening as far as vehicles go, and we started rapidly getting ourselves together to get out of the way. Under the trees, we also had to just rewind a bit, as the dawn was breaking, we had the mist, sort of low mist hanging amongst the trees, and they were busy carrying our own casualties into sort of a clearing station, and we were busy treating the medics, treating the troops, putting up drips, looking at the wounded, and trying to decide who was at risk. And we had four dead and about 9 or 10 wounded guys, some of who were fairly serious and some who were lightly wounded. As we were busy treating these, we had vehicles in the background that we weren't sure what was going on, and got our guys up on the trucks immediately and started moving out. We later heard it was 101 that had been dispatched to come and assist us, because what I didn't say was that we lost communication with our own mortars. So as we went in, we were without mortar support, because the decision had been made that our mortars would be shelling the base before we go in, but we couldn't get radio communication with them. And when things started going wrong, we decided to just go in anyway. And it was only later that we managed to reestablish comms with our own mortars and get mortar support. So there had been a time when things had been considered difficult, and that people at home had decided to try and get 101 to help us. So we were so far north that we actually had to drive south for most of the day before they could send 2 Pumas for us with long-range tanks that evening to come and collect our dead and wounded from us that evening. After that, things wound down fairly quickly with 3-2. We were still busy patrolling, but the rainy season had started. And those who've been in Angola in the rainy season will remember that suddenly finding water to drink is no longer any part of your issue, because you just put your water bottle next to the bivvy at night, and in the morning you've got more water than you've ever wanted. Sleeping in water inside your trenches. Everything is wet. Your sleeping bag inside its black bag is the only thing that you try and keep dry. You don't even bother with raincoats or anything. You just get wet because you're going to be wet anyway. So we just marched in that warm rain all day long doing the patrolling. But basically, we found nothing on most of it. And after about a week of marching in the rain, everybody was sick and tired of this. Our boots were green. They flew in a whole bag of boots just so that we could get everybody could have boots on their feet for the rest of the march. Threw away the old ones. And after about a week, the troops said they've had enough of this. Normally, everything was quiet. There was complete noise control and everything else, small fires and all that. And they just started chopping down trees and they made a bonfire right there in the middle and said, well, this is just how it is. They don't care now. They're tired of being cold and in the rain. Then after this, our rotation turn ended, and I suddenly one morning got the message on the radio that I was to be on the chopper that was coming in that morning, coming back home. It's almost missed the chopper, but the radio guy decided to call it back for me, and got a flight out and ended up in Rindu that night. Sort of not having shaved for about close to 2-3 months by then. I had a bit of a beard growing and only having cold showers there. I thought, well, this is not going to work for me, and I just went home. Now, my dad used to drop me at the airport and pick me up in the morning. So he was managed to make a phone call, and he was at Waterkloof in the morning to pick me up. But I was still so dirty with my beard that he didn't even recognize me walking off the plane. After this, I was again back in at Baragwanath for another while. And what we used to do is the Wits guys were organized to work in the Joburg Hospital casualty, and I was supposed to do some sessions there in the casualty for a bit of extra money. We were coming up towards Easter weekend, and I was supposed to work a shift there. And then about the Wednesday before Easter, the phone rang. And Ingela was on the phone and said, "Oh, Andre, won't you come in tomorrow morning just for a briefing quickly?" Arrived at Spescop and was said, "Well, there's something happening. Look at the maps here. There's this room with a cupboard maps. There's a combined operation happening between 101 Battalion. The paratroopers were being dropped as a stopper group, and 3-2 was behind as a support in the event that things got too rough. And it was that Mupa Valley axis that we were going to be attacking in. And a couple of us doctors were being sent up. Frans Verster, who was a couple of years my senior, but who was a major at the time, was going in with me. And I was going because I was jump current at the time. So by now we sort of knew a little bit more about what to take. So at least we didn't arrive there without anything. So I went home, packed my kit, and got on the plane with Frans. And we arrived at Rindu. This time it was a real flossy flight. And we sat down, we had the discussions there, and the various medical officers writing the medical plans were talking to us and deciding how to allocate us. And it was between Frans and myself who was going with 101 and who was going with the paratroopers. I said to him, well, I've just spent I spent 3 months walking around in the bush. I wouldn't mind getting the experience of being in the vehicles. And in the end, it turned out also that the doctor was going in with the pathfinders on the helicopter, because they were also worried about the doctor being injured jumping and then the group being without a doctor. So Frans said, well, he's happy to go with the pathfinders on the helicopter. I can go with 101 on the vehicles. And that was sort of how it worked. Everything was planned that the first drop of the paratroopers would be, I think it was on the Thursday somewhere, or Thursday night, and then the vehicles would be going in on the Sunday. But you know how these things work. So, of course, on the Thursday, Friday night, Thursday night, actually, we were sitting in the pub having a quiet beer, and a friend of mine from medical school drifted in. He was about a year ahead of me. He'd been with the Reactiemag, and they'd not, whatever he'd been involved in, nothing interesting had happened, and he was just bored and waiting to get his plane home. And Anthony and I sat down and had a beer, and we had a second beer, and the one thing that was always working is the guys who knew who the 7 med guys were, knew that if 7 med doctors were sitting around the base somewhere, something was about to happen. And he said, well, he's been bored, and maybe what about it is, I think that they wouldn't have a spot for him as well. So I said, well, let's go and chat to Cubby, because there's always another. I'm sure there's never too many doctors on that. And we went to chat to the officer in charge of the section. And he said, well, that's fine. We've got Frans going with the bats. We've got you going with 101, but we don't have anybody with 3-2 as the backup. They probably don't need a doctor, but it's fine. If there's a volunteer, he's there. We'll organize it. So Anthony ended up being allocated to support the 3-2 support group. Went in on the Sunday. We had a Sunday morning, everybody went to the church service, and Sunday afternoon it was this massive convoy heading into Angola, basically the 101 Caspers, and we took one of the Rinkels ambulances. For the trip, the Rinkels was fitted out with as required. It's on the photo, but it's not. The 762 on the Rinkels is not something that we ever advertise. The one thing, as many people will tell you, is when you start bush braking with the vehicles, the mirrors go, and having a machine gun on the outside is not good, because the trees take it out after a while. We went in the afternoon. We were looking around. As many times, the information was not ideal. The paratroopers actually had got nothing to do. We didn't really find anybody at all from 101. But guess what? The support group at 3-2 Battalion got involved in a massive firefight at one of the lower towns, and the doctor who'd been with me actually got wounded in the action. The guy who volunteered. We spent a couple of days traveling around with the Caspers, trying to find something to do, set up a few ambushes, never traveling on the road, staying out of trying to stay off the mines. And as things work in the military, Frans was the Transvaal rugby team doctor. By Wednesday, we figured out that we weren't going to find any action, and the Transvaal had a game on the Saturday. Now, Frans, being a friend and a fellow from 7 Medical, they arranged an Alouette to come and pick him up so that he could be home for this rugby game, and he organized that the Allo came past me to pick me up as well on on the same trip. So the two of us were flown out by Thursday instead of needing to go with the vehicles and walking out. Flew us to one of the small bases on the border where they sent a Bosbok to pick us up. So rugby had its correct place in all of this. Went back to the usual routine, went back and spent time at Baragwanath Hospital again. Around about this time, things started going pear-shaped. This was about the middle of 87 now. And the paratroopers had realized, the Air Force had realized that they were struggling to support as the Angolans were now controlling the airspace. We were struggling to get the helicopters in, and we didn't have aircraft that could fly as they wished. So the paratroopers decided that they needed their own mobile theatre. They needed to build a mobile operating theatre that could be airdropped with the unit as it was dropped in, and was able to support the unit for approximately 3 days independently for all the treating of the wounded and surgery that needed to be done. Hoping that after 3 days we would be supported by either the vehicles or would be able to be extracted. Because by now I'd had almost a year's worth of experience in anesthesia, I was pulled in by the unit. 7 Med was allocated to do this, and I was pulled in by the unit to put together the anesthetic side of the mobile airdroppable theatre. Sat around and got basically whatever we wanted we could get. I pulled in the drugs, even got a draw-over vaporizer, and everything that I felt that would allow us local anesthetics to do a significant number of operations as required without any support from the outside for 2 to 3 days. The surgical side got their bit and got a collapsible theatre, operating table, light, and a generator. All of this was put together. It all fitted onto one pallet, and in your photo shoot, there's actually a thing showing all of us preparing. It was then decided that this needed to be tested. So, looking for a place to test our mobile theatre, spoke to CSI, and they had a UNITA hospital which had newly been built outside of Mavinga, and it was decided that we would move our airdroppable theatre as one unit to the UNITA hospital, and we would support UNITA for a while to test drive the hospital and see whether this was working or not. So got ourselves flew to Southwest, then on to Mavinga. It struck me afterwards that in my second year in the military, I spent 6 days in Southwest Africa and about 6 months in Angola. It was never more than just a day passing through. Then we flew into Mavinga, and UNITA sent an ambulance, an old Unimog ambulance, to pick us up and flew us took us to a newly built hospital, which they dug into the ground. It was dug into about hip depth, so that in the event of it being shelled, at least it could function almost as a bunker as well. And they had an operating area. We unpacked the mobile theatre there so that we would be able to support whatever came. It was really well built, all from stuff from the surrounding areas. They'd even built little huts for us to sleep in, with 2 beds and a wash-up area on each. And it was built in a way that if you had to run at night, you missed the toilets on your left and you'd be running south, so that we knew which way we would be having to go if we needed to evacuate there. They brought the various wounded from the contacts down, the UNITA wounded down for us, and we treated a fair number of casualties at the time, managed to understand what was working and what wasn't working from the mobile theatre, the mobile theatre went on to become a standard part of the South African Defence Force, and having got some more fancy tents and stuff in time, it's still basically the one that we created back in 1987. We were very well treated by UNITA. We got some people to wash for us. We got a guy from Zambia that could speak a little bit of English to organize our meals for us. And from time to time, one particularly badly wounded guy that we got permission to fly out back to the hospital in Southwest. I managed to escort him out one night. Again, the medical network working, we managed to bring a couple of crates of beer back on the return flight. So the hospital was well stocked at the time. Went back and spent my usual time back at Baragwanath, where I was part of the furniture by now. And then we were looking at August, September, with things warming up significantly. Got called in by Angola, and we were flying up, and I was going to join the group that was inside Angola at the time, and we were actually taking again our military theatre, and there was a whole group of us going, and General Surgeon George Schaaf was going to be the surgeon. I was going as the anaesthetist, and we had a couple of medics and a couple of other doctors in support. This was obviously the build-up to Quito, and they were expecting things to warm up. We flew in, and as at the airport that night, by this time, we basically had a shuttle service going between Southwest Africa and Mavinga, and you could catch the hourly flight in or out, whichever way you want, between the C-130s and C-160s that were continuously flying in, either weaponry, people, and all the rest. And one of my recollections of this flight is that I was standing at the airport and waiting to get the flight in, and there were a group of guys in overalls, and I'm not sure whether they were tiffies or tankers, or, well, it wouldn't be tankers. The tanks weren't up there yet by that time, but with the rattles. But they were dirty, they were black, I looked at these guys, and this was not my first trip up there, and I looked at these guys and I thought, no, this is real. Things have been happening out there. Looking at the way these guys look, they didn't bother to wash. They're just standing there waiting for their flight home. Things were happening. This was after Captain Mac from 3-2 had been killed when their rattle got shot out and all of that already. So we knew things were warming up. At Mavinga, we joined an ambulance with a couple of medics on it as well, and we joined some of the Battle Group Bravo with some of 6-1 Mech's guys going up to Quito. It was at the time of the Victor, the Angolan Air Force patrolling, and us having to travel at night and camouflage the vehicles during the day to avoid being found by them. And we were actually up there when 21 Charlie got hit by the bombs. Again, the medics we weren't in the right place at the time to be able to assist, but we certainly, we became gardeners there. We learned to dig foxholes that were really deep, and where we thought it was shallow graves we were digging with 3-2. This time we were digging the real thing. You made sure that your whole body was able to get into that foxhole that you were digging. Apart from the aircraft, not very much were happening. We were hanging around waiting for things to happen. Around about this time, I got the signal from the unit that they wanted me back home again, and I was looking for a lift out. So the only place that they could find to stick me into was on one of the convoys going from Quito out to Mavinga to catch the aircraft there, was on the diesel tanker for the convoy. So it was myself and this youngster that was driving his diesel tanker, and it was an interesting trip. And got this little guy was saying to me, "No, he's when I get home, won't you just give my mum a call and just say to her that I'm fine and I'm all right and all of that." And he was actually a G3 and was not allowed to be outside the borders of South Africa, not even allowed into Namibia. So when I eventually got home, I made the phone call to his mum, and she said to me, "Oh, he's not in Southwest Africa, is he?" So it was, I could quite honestly say, "No, don't worry, ma'am, he's not in Southwest Africa. I didn't explain to tell her he's driving diesel bunkers for convoys being bombed in Angola." But that was the nature of the time. The convoys were always interesting events, in the sense that you were always traveling in the dust. You were always traveling behind the other vehicles. You were supposed to travel at night with the convoy lights only. So one night we was on our way to Mavinga. We were supposed to go into one of the forward bases, but we arrived at the same time as one of the Pumas arrived that had to drop somebody important off at the base. So what was happening is that we couldn't find the base, and the Puma couldn't find the base, and everybody was busy shooting off flares trying to decide where they were. And whenever we shot a flare so that the base could tell us where we were, the Puma started circling us. And as always, complete chaos. It meant that we got lost, and by daylight we were not camouflaged yet. And as sort of dawn was breaking, we heard an aircraft approaching, and we still weren't in camouflage. Fortunately, it turned out to be one of our own bombers that was doing a treetop sortie early morning, and we escaped without getting into trouble there. Got back to Mavinga, got on the flight to Namibia, and I got flown home. This was Sunday. On Thursday, I got on the plane to Durban. Again, we had the briefing. Again, the briefing had not worked. We were allocated to join the Tafelberg, which was the supply ship which would be operating out of Durban at the time. We would be joined by 2 strike craft, and operators from both 4 and 1 recce would be on the strike craft. We would be I was going again as the anaesthetist because Tafelberg had a fully operational theatre. So we would be going as a surgeon, anaesthetist, and a spare doctor on the Tafelberg, but we'd not been informed that to be on a ship like the Tafelberg, you're supposed to take your step-out uniform. So we arrived in Browns, and we'd been told to take, because they did not want the 7 med doctors to be recognized, we'd been told to wear civilian clothes. So arriving in civilian clothes at our boat, we were told that actually, being the doctors on board, we were to join the captain at his table for dinner in the evenings, and this meant that we needed step-out uniforms for the evening. So the Navy had to take us to the Navy stores, and we had to be issued with Navy uniforms. And the captain had to relax the dinner rules to allow the doctors to be able to go into dinner with them. Now, dinner on the Tafelberg with the officers was very good. The food was very good. There was special wine every night. These guys knew how to live. Sailed from Durban, and we were sailing up the east coast past Mozambique. The story that was told to the sailors during the briefing was that We were dropping weapons for the Mozambique government, but because they were not openly friendly to South Africa, we were going to be doing this at night and not where we could be seen by anybody. The two strike craft with the Tafelberg's decks were loaded with containers with weapons, and we had two strike craft and a small boat and a Puma with us. Coming up to somewhere around the Maputo area, we were supposed to be 2 nights worth of dropping the weaponry, but the guys decided that we will try and start a bit earlier and try and get it all done in one night. We set up the theatre and prepared ourselves for an event of casualties. The other doctor joined the small boats that were going to set up the beach landing, and the chopper was started ferrying the weaponry from Tafelberg onto land, and we were moving that across. So we had no adverse events, and all the weaponry was transferred to land during the evening that needed to be done. But we'd all been up all night, and next morning we sort of were feeling a little bit tired, and after breakfast we thought we'd maybe lie in the sun a little bit. And round about early morning, an American Orion reconnaissance plane from Diego Garcia started circling us. Now, if you read the story in Iron Fist from the Sea, they tell you that this did not influence the operation at all, and it was purely accidental. The rest of the operation was promptly cancelled after this, and we were told that we would be going home. So you can make your own deduction from this. The doctors, we were given the choice of going home on the Tafelberg, or it was assumed that the strike craft would probably be home earlier, and we could transfer to the strike craft and go with the strikers. Not having been on the strike craft before, it was also sounded like an interesting event, which is again a rookie error you only make once. We had an interesting transfer that night. There was a landing craft from the Tafelberg that took us across to the strike craft. It was we had the nets coming down the side, and you had to climb down the nets into the landing craft, which then took you across. Now, the strike craft, not having been designed for the number of people that they ended up with, those of us late joiners did not have any place to stay. So my sleeping spot was between the toilets on the left and the kitchen on the right. So on the one side, I had C6 doctors, sailors, and soldiers. And on the other side, I had sailors cooking breakfast for themselves there. I did not have great sea legs, and I did not eat for 3 days while we were on the strike craft. What ended up happening was that we had, at that time, top secret weaponry on the back of the strike craft, which meant that we weren't allowed to enter Durban Harbour during the day. So despite having arrived there sooner than the Tafelberg, we still ended up having to cruise up and down outside the harbour and only going in after dark. They got our flights back to Pretoria, and that suddenly, just like that, it was all over. We were told to go back to the unit, and early December we signed our papers, and we were told we were gone. Now, at the time, 7Med was running around 7 hospitals in the rest of Africa as well as on the Comores. And early on in the time, I'd actually applied to join the military as a permanent force member, and there was a an intention that I would be involved with the doctor who was running all these hospitals in the other areas, but didn't work out like that. And as I got back from Mozambique, I got the offer to go to the Comores for 3 months, but at the time I felt that I'd had my bit with the military, and having been at Baragwanath for 2 years by then, the prof spoke to me and said that I was actually at a state bursary, which meant I had to work for either the district surgeon or some very peripheral hospitals. But because they knew me so well, they would actually, the hospital with Baragwanath would take over my bursary, and I could get a training post immediately instead of having to sit around and wait for one. So I thanked the army, signed my papers, and joined Baragwanath as a registrar at the beginning of 1988. After that, I was called up twice. The one time was before the Southwest elections. There was a fear that there would be a armored invasion from either Zambia or Angola, and there were certain bridges that had been identified that they felt the operators would need to take out, and I was allocated as doctor for an operation if that was supposed to happen. This operation never went down, but the good part about it was that because they weren't sure where we would need to escape and evade, they wanted us to have passports. Never having been out of the country, I didn't have a passport. And as I wasn't around to be able to sign the papers, the colonel just signed on my passport for me. And for the first 10 years, I used the passport, but I didn't even have my own signature on it. The next time was I was in the 90s when South Africa presented the International Conference for Military Medical Officers, and I was asked to lecture on the anesthetic side of that. And after that, my involvement with the military basically ended. On our last day of clearing out, we went to had to clear out in Centurion at the SAM's headquarters. First, we had to hand in all our equipment or whatever the army knew about. I managed to hang on to some of my kit that didn't seem to have been noted anywhere. But as we sort of got to the SAM's headquarters to sign out, the sort of some of the officers were friendly and happy and helpful, and some of them thought, well, this is your last day, I can still mess you around. And we had one major that wasn't in his office as I got there to have my papers signed, and I ended up having to wait around, and there was nowhere to sit, so I sat down on his desk, and the major arrived in to find a lutie sitting on his desk and got extremely upset about this and had quite a bit to say. But it's always a bad thing for us to have a lot to say to a 7-med doctor or medic when he's just done 2 years of doing whatever the military wanted, and he's about to leave the army, and you think it's the right time to speech him. So I invited him to phone my colonel and get his ear bent if he felt like it, which he declined to do, and he just signed my papers and let me go. And it's for years from time to time we popped in at the unit. Eventually found out that I was still on part-time strength when I was applying to go to Australia, and they asked if you're in the military anywhere else. So I eventually quit the part-time strength at the time, and that was the end of my military experience. As the veterans started getting together, first we were invited to join the Paratroop Veterans Associations, and then in the last couple of years, 7Med has built up their own Veterans Association, which has become fairly active and is now sort of supported by quite a large group of our guys. And the interesting thing is that we actually only getting to know each other after the war. In the time, you never ever saw any of your guys. We were a unit where everybody operated independently. You belonged to the unit, but you were never with the unit. You were always working with someone else. You were always the odd one out. And this was in retrospect, a very difficult part of the unit. Whereas the other groups, the paratroopers or anybody, would go as a unit and they would unwind, and after an event, they would unwind as a group and they would all be together and do their thing together. Today I would be in Angola with the chance of people shooting at me. This afternoon I'd be on the helicopter to Southwest. Tonight or tomorrow morning I'd be on the plane. Tomorrow afternoon I'd be walking around the shops in Pretoria. And at the time you don't appreciate it, but there's no defusing, there's no unloading of anything. And you get eventually, as the months go, with these events, you really wind up, you tense up, and you do find that it becomes quite difficult to relate to the people at home and to relate to people around you. And you find yourself queuing at the shop to buy something, and you've got people standing in the queue in front of you moaning about the most ridiculous things, and you think, lady, there's people getting shot up north at this moment, and you're busy moaning because this lady is giving you the wrong change or is taking too long to ring up your purchase. And it just felt like a really schizophrenic world. And it was you felt very lonely in it sometimes.
I have to say that this is one of the great episodes. I fully understand what you're talking about. For me, the strangest thing was actually to switch a light on and there's a light and there's not running water. You can go to a toilet, man. That's one of the greatest things ever, is to sit on a toilet, and go flush away and be clean whenever you want to be clean. This is fantastic. But I'm wondering, since you're from Wits University, which is known as a liberal institution, and in 7Met, I suppose you must have a security clearance. With the military intelligence people not being, all over you for no reason whatsoever?
I never noticed that they were specifically interested in me. As I say, I was the only Witsie in my year. In the year ahead of me, there was one as well. And then there was John, who'd been 2 years ahead of me. So it sort of almost seemed as if we had one Witsie every year. There didn't seem to be any issues that I noticed.
Now, when all of you doctors get together from different universities, do you look at each other and wonder how well this guy is trained or not? Or do you think the standard would be fairly much at the same high levels expected from a medical school?
Certainly, in those days, I think the levels were very similar. Everybody had a lot of experience because there was the government hospitals were well staffed, and everybody had a lot of time and in the hospitals and actually had a lot of experience with what they did. So from that point of view, there was never really any issue that we felt anybody would be undertrained.
Are you allowed to treat anybody? And what I mean by that is, if I can take you back to your parachute course where you do a selection, and one of the youngsters, surely they would know you're a doctor, and he falls down there somewhere. Are you obliged to stop whatever you're doing and go and help him? Or would he come to you, or would you just carry on and the instructors will take care of whatever?
At the time of training, we functioned as troops, not as doctors. So a parachute course on that, I mean, they called us doc and that sort of thing, and they were respectful to us, both the instructors to an extent and the troops. But they had their medics that looked after them, and we were not involved in very much at all of the medical side at the time.
But you would know, like you knew with your leg, there's something seriously wrong. Would you then diagnose yourself or ask a mate for a second opinion? How does it work with you people?
Yeah. You do have an idea of what's going on, and that things are not working. But at the time, you also the one thing, certainly in PT course, the one thing you didn't want was to get booted off the course. So as long as you could walk, you kept quiet and didn't ask or say anything at all, because especially by the second week, you really didn't want to get booted off. So if you could walk, you kept quiet and carried on. It's only the next week after I got back to Pretoria that I got sort of a formal medical consult on it.
I'm wondering what would happen. My late wife was a naval aviator, not a pilot. Pilot is from the Air Force. They cannot navigate. Her words, not mine. And she was undergoing some kind of survival training in the swamps of Florida or someplace. And she said one of the aviators, almost said pilot, one of the aviators had a head injury. Something happened. I don't know what happened with him, but he had like a head injury, and they wanted him off the course to be treated immediately because it might influence the way he sees. And then, of course, he can't be an aviator anymore. And part of the training was some Americans who would then pretend to be the enemy, and they would be like the usual interrogations and things. And they tried as they might, they couldn't get these instructors to understand that they're actually dealing with a serious medical emergency. And at the end of the day, they just basically sort of took the guy to the medics anyway. They just told them to bugger off, totally against the rules. Now, how far inside the Army regulations would the medical doctor be? Or do you have any kind of judgment abilities which the Army will forgive at a later stage?
You still, if required, you're still a doctor, and you still make the medical decisions. And certainly in 7 Med, you always knew that the unit would back, as long as you were acting in good faith, using your medical knowledge and whatever, the unit would back whatever you said and whatever you did. And to my knowledge, none of our guys were ever got into trouble for a medical decision or anything like that we did. But you always were on a little bit more of an edge. Like when I was on the river training, although I'd been canoeing with my friends, 10 days of rowing, I got blisters on my hands, and the blisters got infected. But being the doctor on the course, I couldn't pull myself off the course. So whereas I would have probably taken any troop off who had hands looking like mine did, I couldn't take myself off, because then there would be no doctor on the course. So it was always a difficult decision and a difficult call. But and also our training was that you were not, the doctor was not going to be the weakest link. That was what 7Med was all about.
I always ask the medical doctors and the medical people who comes to Legacy, and I want to invite all of you, please. And if you're a 7Med member and you're not part of an association yet, contact Dr. Stefan Rawlins. He's looking for you. Become part of him. But what concerned me is in the 1990s, there came out a whole bunch of books where medics started saying that they would use their medical kit, abuse it actually, to have parties with it, to use the drugs inside that kit to get high or something. In the police, that was simply not possible. You had to sign for everything. It's like a hand grenade. They will not take any excuse for you losing your medical kit or whatever you're issued with. How was it in the army? Is it possible to get away with such behavior? And is it normal behavior amongst the medical people?
I think the last part first. I mean, it's not normal behavior amongst the medical people. Let's start with that. There will always be, medical people are also people, and we always have issues with people that do get into trouble with the controlled substances and that. Certainly, to my knowledge, and in our unit and our stuff, there was never any major issues with it, but it would also not have been shared, so I wouldn't have known. And here and there, the military was a vast conglomeration of different people from different backgrounds and with different interests. And the volunteer units, I think, was a lot more focused. The boredom was a lot smaller part of our makeup. So I don't, certainly not, and I don't know that the control over the substances, we could draw what we needed. I never had an issue that anything got lost that wasn't used, or that I was seriously questioned about everything that I said I'd used. So I don't, to my knowledge, in our unit, it was not a major issue.
I have a lot of questions about the PT course, but since there's going to be videos coming out on that, I will just drop it for now. I mean, but I made notes. I will remember when that video comes out. I mean, I would like to know how you jippo a marble when the instructors are standing right there. But I'm sure they know how to jippo it too. I mean, I'm sure they did it themselves. But I'll leave that question for that video. Looking back now, do you regret anything? Do you think that a young doctor today, if he's looking for adventure, should go and join a similar type of unit wherever he is?
The 7Med is unique, really, in the world, in the sense that there's nowhere else that there's a unit where the doctors get that close to the front as we did. There's an occasional single doctor that has joined, know of an Australian that was actually very involved in the Australian SAS and was very much in the sharp end, but it was not a formal unit. It was an individual doctor that had been allocated. So we're the only group that actually, and also when I was involved with that training course of the international medical officers, nobody ever got as close as we did. There was never an intention that you would be on the sharp end, or you would be shot at and stuff like that. That was, the others were always expected to be way back from that, and if that happened, it was really unplanned and poor planning. Whereas with us, you were expecting that you could be involved in anything at any time. That when you were sent to the various units. It always looks better looking back. The one thing that we knew at the time is that certainly your unit, and to a large extent the army, would look after you as far as possible. They would try to look after you. Nobody would be left behind, in a sense that that sort of gave you a lot of comfort in that sense. Whereas it was, although things were always chaotic once the bullets started flying, they would be looking out for each other and for everybody. Whereas is not. I cannot comment on how that would play out today. So, and also it was a time when this was expected of us. It's not necessarily something that youngsters are made up for today.
Thank you. I really appreciate this conversation. But sadly, we have to go now. The doctor has something to do at the Patron Museum. Once he's done that, perhaps we can tell you guys what's happening there as well. But you can go and visit at least. And so we'll say goodbye and God bless until we meet again. And once again, thank you. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Koos, and thank you very much to you for doing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.